Welcome to another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. This is episode 267, and we have the opportunity to have Guy Riekeman on with us today. And you're coming in from sunny San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Always 84 degrees every day. You don't even have to look at the weather.
And Luke and I are coming in from the beautiful western slope of Colorado, Grand Junction, Colorado. And I'm just really thankful to have you on. I know that you have been with two major chiropractic universities and Life and Palmer. And it sounded like you also did a little work out at Sherman.
I was at Sherman in the early days when Reggie had to leave the college for political reasons. They needed a philosophy instructor, and I stepped in. So that was back when we were still in the grocery store with the walls that didn't go all the way to the top, and then built the campus and moved out in Spartanburg. So yes.
Well, it's an honor to have you on today. And I know that we're going to probably light a lot of people up with new information that you've been doing work with. And but before we get into that, we always love to open up our segments by you telling our audience the chiropractic story, your chiropractic story, and how you got into this beautiful profession. So if you could enlighten us with that story, we'll keep rolling on.
Since there's 50 years behind it, actually more than that, I'm a chiropractic kid. My dad was a graduate in 1947 in those big post-war classes when they had 3,000 students at Palmer. And when he got out of school, he wound up in Albuquerque, New Mexico on South Central Avenue, Route 66. And he and my mom opened up a practice. My sister eventually took over his practice. So that practice has been running continuously since 1947. In Albuquerque, New Mexico. And my dad was one of the early fighters. I didn't realize it. Growing up, you just saw your dad go to work. And I wondered why every weekend he was up at Santa Fe, New Mexico, doing political things. I didn't understand it at all as a kid. And and my dad was, you'd have to have understood him. He was a really kind, sweet, quiet, never talk about yourself kind of guy. So, it wasn't like he came home bitching and moaning or this and that and the other about what was going on, but found out later in life that when they were fighting for certain chiropractic rights, there were 4 chiropractors. He was one of the 4. 2 of them had their offices firebombed, windows blown right out the front of the building. And the other 2 had their records destroyed. Someone came in and put gas on their records, all sorts of stuff. So, and I found a lot of this stuff out about my dad after he passed away. There was I don't know if you remember, he passed away more than a decade ago. His name was Joseph Keating. He was considered the chiropractic historian. That's what he spent his whole life doing. And he came up to me one day and said that he was doing a study on state licensing boards. Back when I was in school, national boards didn't exist. When you graduated, if you wanted to practice in Michigan, you went and took the Michigan license. You wanted to practice in New Mexico, you took the New Mexico license. And if there was some reciprocity, but for the most part, you had to try and go get all these licenses as quickly as possible and then hold on to them for the rest of your lifetime in case you ever wanted to move. But with rare exception, they all had medical boards, basic science boards that you had to get through. So when my dad graduated, even though there was a licensure in New Mexico, chiropractors couldn't even sit for the exam because they had to get through the basic science board first. That was done by medical doctors. And basically it was what national boards is part 1 today. It was all anatomy, physiology, diagnosis, and it was all essay questions, and it was all graded subjectively. And Joseph Keating was doing a study on these boards and how they kept chiropractors out, even though there was licensure in those states. And he came to me one day and said, in the process of doing the study, in the entire history of medical licensing boards, before we got out from underneath that thumb, there was only one chiropractor ever appointed by a governor to sit on the basic science medical board to ensure that chiropractors had a fair shot of getting through. And he told me it was my father in New Mexico. So my father was a warrior, but a quiet warrior, and to a large degree. So, I'm a chiropractic kid that grew up in that kind of environment. My mom worked in my dad's office until 3 months before she passed away at the age of 93. And she was still doing everything by hand and on a Selectric IBM typewriter. She thought computers were the devil's work, and she was not going to have any part of them. People always applaud when I tell them my mom worked in an office like that, and I say, don't do it. She complained about it every day. She'd go, I have to go down to the office today because in the entire time since 1947, she could never find anyone to run the front desk correctly, so she had to go in and fix it every day. Right? But that was my mom. She was a real fighter. So I got a little bit of that from my mom, and hopefully some compassion from my father along the way. And my sister still practices. I was playing basketball, just to finish that story, and was a McDonald All-American a million years ago, and was playing in New Mexico and hated the coach. So I had a scholarship also to DePaul University in Chicago with old man Ray Myers, and anybody that knows basketball would know that name. They were kind of the basketball icons back, in the late 60s, early 70s. But you had to sit out a year. You couldn't just transfer schools like you do today. And of course, the Vietnam War was raging. And so the worst thing you could do is sit out at home because you were going to go to Vietnam if that was the case. So my dad said, why don't you go do a year at Palmer? And so I did, with no intention of staying, and was literally a few weeks away from leaving Palmer when Virgil Strang, who was teaching anatomy at the time, gave some extra credit points if we'd go listen to a speaker in this old, dark, dank auditorium that was on campus. And we weren't that interested in the speaker, but, there was nothing else to do in Davenport at that time. So a bunch of us went to hear this speaker, a guy named Reggie Gold. And 3 hours into Reggie's 4-hour presentation, and I couldn't even tell you what he said, but 3 hours into that 4-hour presentation, I said to myself, this is it. I'm not going anywhere. This is what I want to do. So stuck it out at Palmer, finished in 1972, set up practice in Kansas City, and built 100-a-day upper cervical Blair practice, Atlas only, and then went to Sherman. When they needed head of a philosophy department, I taught X-ray there, and head of the philosophy department, and was the vice president in charge of development. And then, of course, Joe Felicia and I met up and set up Renaissance, which produced the first patient education on video in 1977, when only 10% of American households had a VCR. Was way ahead of the curve. And then then I dropped out for 4 years and hung out on a beach in Southern California, doing absolutely nothing for 4 years. And people tell you get tired of that after a while. I found out that was a lie. But very little passion. And so one day I said, I got to get back in the game. And while I was there for 4 years, I actually enrolled at UCLA and did a film program, which later we used in the Centennial when we did the film for the Chiropractic Centennial in '95. But anyway, set up then a management company called Quest, which was, and I think still today, the largest management company ever. We had 7,000 chiropractors in the management company, and then got called to Palmer when they were in trouble, and went there and rebuilt Palmer to the largest school. And then in 2004, went down to Life because they were really in trouble. And over the 15 years there, built the largest chiropractic college, along with a lot of really cool programs in positive psychology and work with the Dalai Lama and things that you know about. It's a remarkable institution, besides being the #1 rugby program in the United States. So that's my chiropractic life in a thumbnail. And people always think that I've retired, and I haven't. I'm working harder than ever. My interests right now are spreading chiropractic throughout Europe, chiropractic education. We're looking at that, and opening up some clinics in the Detroit area that are neuro-based, and getting ready. We've just released recently something that's going to be as revolutionary as video education was in 1977, which is an app called My Lifestyle IQ to manage patients remotely out of chiropractic offices to the chiropractic lifestyle.
Well, it sounds like you have been a busy, busy man over the 5 decades of working in the beautiful profession of chiropractic and helping the universities build their integrity and get back on track. And now you're pioneering this um, lifestyle IQ app to help with patient management. And I think it's just really remarkable hearing your story. And I know there's a lot of people out there that might have some parts of it, but that was a very well detailed lineage of being a young man all the way to where you are today. So thank you so much for opening up that knowledge to all of our listeners today.
I was someone one time who didn't know me got up and read my resume as an introduction, which is horrible, right? Just horrible. But they read the resume, and I was standing at the back of the room, and I was thinking, gosh, either people think I've done a lot or I can't hold a job. I'm not sure which one. So, but you get up every day with vision and some principle, and you go to work, and the universe takes care of the rest.
What would be some advice you'd give to a chiropractor who wants to get more new patients in their office?
You know what? That's been the question since 1895 that every chiropractor asks. It's probably the ultimate pain point for most chiropractors. It's the chiropractic formula from a management standpoint is really simple. You take the number of new patients you get in a time frame like a month, and you multiply that times your PVA, and that equals your office volume. And then you multiply that times your collections ratio and subtract your overhead. And that determines whether you're driving a Mercedes or a 1956 Duster. So the question on new patients, there's really 4 ways to get new patients. 2 of them are in the office, 2 of them are outside of the office. The 2 in the office are referrals and doing special events. The 2 outside the office are standing at a booth, doing screenings, which is pain in and of itself and death over a period of time. Or today, the internet opened up to us and provided us a forum to do that. So I think there's a combination of things. One is obviously you have to look at Facebook and Instagram and those kinds of things to stimulate patients. But if you're not building a referral practice at the same time, then you're going to be doing that for the rest of your lifetime. And I know a lot of chiropractors who reached a point. I reached it in my practice in Kansas City where you just couldn't accept any new patients. We were getting up to 40 new patients a month and referring half of them to other chiropractors in town because there wasn't any space. And if you're going to build a referral practice, that's all based on education. So you've got to educate your patients while you're out also using Facebook to drive, usually symptomatic patients into your practice. So it's a combination of both of those things, but it's in the end, it's about education, building up a PVA. I knew one chiropractor, he was seeing 400 patient visits a week, which was where he wanted to be. That was it. 1,600 a month, but his PVA was 256. Wow. He was only accepting 4 new patients a month. And it wasn't 256 in a short time frame. Basically, when they started with him, they were with him for a lifetime, right? So ultimately, if you want to reduce your dependency on new patients, you've got to build up patients that are coming in with their families on a regular basis. I had one chiropractor in Canada when we were doing all the management stuff, and I could not get him off this. He said he believed that the job of a chiropractor was to manipulate the joint that was in pain till it was out of pain and then dismiss the patient. And I said to him, I'll bet you $100 I can tell you what your PVA is. He goes, you got it. We put down $100 each. I said, it's 7. He said, you're wrong. It's 6.8. Right. And so I said, if you've got a PVA of 6.8, then you have a necessity to get 30, 40 new patients every month versus a PVA of 256, where you only need 2, 3, or 4 and don't have room for the rest. So to answer your question, ultimately, it'd be nice not to need new patients. And the ones that you get, ultimately, they should all come from referrals to the best patients. But while you're building that, obviously, today's world with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all of those mechanisms are great ways to get our story to chiropractors.
Well, I appreciate you sharing so openly because I really believe that you should do nurturing marketing for the people that know, love, and trust you. And you should also pay attention to silo marketing, which are social media, internal referrals. And you should also understand the silo marketing of external events. So I think that all chiropractors should understand that the same things, like getting into a BNI chapter and getting into like a young professionals networking group, like those are community building techniques as well. And if a
Absolutely.
chiropractor's not doing those things, then they're one dimensional. And we have to start teaching, 4 and 5 dimensional style of marketing strategies so people can actually make it. Because as you know, being the chancellor of a school and a college, that the student debt is something that becomes somewhat of a problematic for the practitioner moving forward. So marketing is one of those things that they don't talk a whole lot about, but keeping the people that you get inside of the clinic and getting them to refer is probably one of the best strategies, I would say. I've learned from a lot of the greats over the years, and those are the strategies I've heard is the best, is to harvest the community for what you can build a practice on, and then learn how to get those referrals coming in.
It's about building a community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's more than just having patients. It's about building warriors that are going to go out and carry your message out to other people.
Mm-hmm. Advocates for the profession. I think that that's a big thing too, and getting families healthy too. And I think that that's something that we need to speak more about now than ever, is that having a healthy family is so important moving forward. And to just having that, the family unit, the mom. I know that there's so many guys out there will tell you that like the mother is the decision maker for the family.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can really get the mom to understand the big idea, then the children are healthier growing up long term, and they're chiro kids like you grew up as a chiro kid. Chiro kids are, they're going to have stronger abilities to stay healthy long term, and when they do sleepovers and whatnot, they're not getting delivered with a bag full of meds.
Yeah.
And that's something pretty common nowadays. So we have to really get to the family unit and start taking care of mom and dad and the babies.
Well, and plus the work that Heidi Havik has done out of New Zealand has absolutely documented now on a peer review level that the greatest benefits of chiropractic are cumulative with adjustments over a long period of time, even though the drama of a symptom going away initially, may be impressive and important because the body's an amazing healing machine. But on the other hand, for ultimate health, long-term care is absolutely critical from a clinical standpoint. Not from a philosophical, from a clinical standpoint, long-term care is critical.
So maybe you could tell us what you're doing for your own and your family's health.
Well, I have to tell you, it's a reflection of who I am. My parents never vaccinated us. My kids aren't vaccinated. My grandkids aren't vaccinated. I grew up on a small farm. We grew all of our own food. And I always say when I'm presenting MLIQ, one of the facts of today's world is that in 1950, my dad was getting better results with chiropractic care than chiropractors get today. And people say, well, it can be because the adjustments are different. And the answer, that's the case. The adjustments are the same. What's different is we don't have people in 1950 that were walking in full of pesticides, taking 3 drugs, thinking that was a natural lifestyle, information overload, living in worlds of fear, which we know is detrimental to people's immune systems. So in 1950, there weren't GMOs, there weren't pesticides, there wasn't pollution in the environment. People's bodies weren't all full of crap. So when they got adjusted, the body could immediately begin to respond. Today, when people are walking in the office, they're so toxic and they're so information overloaded and so blasted with these things, with radiation floating through the air, radio waves, et cetera, that it's an amazing that the body's even alive, much less able to respond. So on one hand, it speaks to the power of chiropractic and the power of the adjustment and the power of the body to repair and heal itself. On the other hand, we've got to get our lifestyles. The chiropractic lifestyle says, let's get rid of thoughts, traumas, and toxins to the nervous system, right? Environmental toxins, emotional stresses, and physical traumas. And so as we do that, along with making corrections, the patient's results are multiplied. So we try to live that kind of a lifestyle. I wish I wasn't addicted to ice cream, but I am. But I try to make it up in other areas, and certainly try to eat as pure and as well as I can. Make sure I get exercise, make sure I keep my mind clear, make sure I get sleep, all those kinds of things which we know are critical to having a healthy immune system and nerve system.
Well, you know, you being such a leader in this profession, it's really nice to hear that you are fallible and like ice cream.
More than that, but that's my worst, you know.
But it's also a telltale to where we are today. Like you said, we're on information overload. People don't know what media to trust or where to get their information sourced from. Because, you know, as we know, inside of a chiropractic office, they're going to say, live a chiropractic lifestyle, you know, start eating real food and stay hydrated.
One of the most amazing works I ever read was by Ian Coulter at the RAND Corporation at UCLA, who said there's 5 conversations going on today, which you'll get: vitalism versus mechanism, naturalism versus holism, naturalism versus artificialism, holism versus reductionism, patient rights versus authoritarianism, and conservative therapeutics versus high-risk interventions. So medicine falls down on the side of mechanism, authoritarianism, reductionism, artificialism, and high-risk interventions. And people that want to live that lifestyle, all you have to do, that's WebMD and Google, right? That's how they're teaching people to live that lifestyle. The chiropractic lifestyle is about vitalism, holism, naturalism, conservative therapeutics, patient rights, humanism, etc. And where do people go to get that? And that's why one of the reasons why we created My Lifestyle IQ, so that patients could have access not only to information, but under the coaching of a chiropractor, direction of a chiropractor, when they get the chiropractic idea, they have programs they can do for brain health and nutrition and getting toxins out of their body and sleep and reducing weight and having positive mental attitudes and all those kinds of issues that are critical to an individual. So, you know, just one example, they know that one of the main precursors of Alzheimer's in men is belly fat in midlife. Well, if we know that and we've got a patient coming in and a patient wants to avoid Alzheimer's, why wouldn't we support them along with their chiropractic adjustments by giving them some education about how to take care of themselves?
So where do you see chiropractic going in the next 20 years or so?
Oh man, I've been asked that question almost since the day I started chiropractic. On my bad days, I would tell you, you know, there's not that bright of a future. If I felt good that day, I'd give you all sorts of positives. But the bottom line is chiropractic is going to go wherever chiropractors take it. And so we've got to make sure that we're educating our students coming out of school. I think there's no question at all that chiropractic has got to move in the consumer's mind from a backbone kind of specialist to a neurologist. What we do is always supposed to have been about the nerve system, always. When we had Sidney Crosby, who had retired because of 2 massive concussions in some playoffs in Tampa, Florida. Those that don't know Sidney, he is the poster child for the National Hockey League, for the NHL. He was the youngest. He was Gretzky, but he was even breaking Gretzky's records as he was going along. And he had to retire because of 2 massive concussions. And of course, the medical solution to that is to sit you in a dark room for 9 months and hope that your brain reboots. But his didn't. And so quietly, he wound up at Life University. They thought he was going to be there for months. They flew in all sorts of hockey players so that when he needed to get on the ice, there would be people there who understood what he was going through. And he was there 1 week getting chiropractic care and having work done on reducing some of this trauma to his nerve system that had happened. And a week later, he was back on ESPN announcing his comeback with the owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins and our functional neurologist at the time. And of course, then it hit the front page of Sports Illustrated. And our phones rang off the hook for days. There were a couple of days our phones literally shut down because of people all over the world who had no hope who saw some hope and were trying to find something to do that could impact their life in a positive way. One of the people, and while it's sort of fun to talk about big name people and all of that, to me, they're just mechanisms to get the story out to other people. One of them was a kid from Alaska. Had a 15-year-old kid, was a hockey player. He got hit in the chest with a hockey stick during a match. His feet went out and he landed on the back of his neck and his head, and had a vestibular concussion. Number of days of throwing up, lapses in memory, classic concussion kind of stuff, disorientation. All that went away, but what didn't go away was he lost his ability to talk. He couldn't say one single letter, couldn't say a number, nothing could come out of his mouth. And the MDs told him that it was going to be permanent. And so they told him, his parents, to start getting ready to put him in special schools and all of that. He was never going to talk again. And because he'd seen the article in Sports Illustrated, his dad jumped on a plane, flew to Atlanta, Georgia, got a hotel room, and brought him into the clinic. 2 days after having him under care with, adjusting him and our neuro stuff, 2 days later, he got the first word out of his mouth. It was B. His dad started to cry. He said his name 2 days later. 8 days later, when he left, he was putting whole sentences together. And a month later, he sent us a video after being under care when we sent him back to a chiropractor in Alaska, talking perfectly normal, like nothing had ever happened to him before. That's what we do. That's the magic of what we do. But, if we're not neurology based, no one's going to come in because, he had a bad, he had a neck pain, right, on that particular level. So I think as we move into the future, we've got to recognize our neurological roots as a profession and how biomechanics impacts that, and present ourselves in a way that has to do with people's overall health in a vitalistic way, rather than treating neck and back pain.
Well, I think you hit it spot on, is that chiropractic gives years to people's life and life to people's years. And I think that that's something that, goes back to Sid, and he would say there's nothing bigger than life.
Yeah.
And there's nothing bigger to life than when you see somebody's life come back to them. And that's the truth of it.
When we were getting all these emails and text messages and phone calls from around the world, the guy who developed the gyro stem, which is a whole nother story, we should do another show sometime. He's an engineer and a friend of mine out of Colorado Springs. And it saved his daughter's life, what he did. But we would sit every night and read. We couldn't answer everything that came in, but we would read all the text messages and emails. And I remember one 15-year-old girl from Canada wrote to us, and she said, I'm an extreme sport athlete. I mountain bike, I rock climb, I board competitively. She said, I fell in a bike race last year and hit my head on a rock. And I haven't been able to do any of those things since. And they just told me I have enough brain trauma that I'll never be able to do them for the rest of my life. She said, I thought about committing suicide because they were my life. And she said, then I read the Sidney Crosby story, and I'll never forget this line. On my deathbed, this is the line that I'll remember as I look back on my career in chiropractic. She said, can you give me my life back? Can you give me my life back? That's what we do, right? We get up every day, we give, serve, love, and do out of this gratitude and abundance that we have as chiropractors. And in the process, we give people their lives back. And as long as we go to the office with that, they'll never stop us.
Well, we're starting to get towards the edge of this interview, but maybe you can touch upon who some of your personal heroes have been. Who's inspired you to be who you are?
Well, I'd have to put the Dalai Lama on the list. I've had a couple of private audiences with him, and after the first, and he's a great guy. A private audience with him is a room that's it's like a hotel room, right? Basically. But in that room will be 10 CIA guys with their black suits talking in their wrists because he's a head of state. And since he's considered a terrorist in China, there'll be 10 guys with military fatigues on with hand grenades and machine guns. And then all the monks, that's a private audience with the Dalai Lama. And he and I sat down and we had a great discussion for 20 minutes one day, and I invited him to life, which he accepted. And when I walked out of the room, 20 years earlier, 2 MDs did something to my daughter in what should have been a normal procedure, and it cost her her life. And then they lied about it, and I hated those guys. If I'd ever found one of them on the street, I'm sure I would have harmed them. And I walked out of that room that day, and this wave, and the Dalai Lama and I did not speak about her at all, but I walked out of that room and this wave of forgiveness went through my body. Not that they're not responsible for what they did, but your life's different when you're walking around hating somebody versus forgiving them. So Dalai Lama would definitely be at the top of that list for me. I wouldn't mind sitting down, having an intellectual discussion with Ayn Rand. I enjoy her stuff. And of course, who wouldn't want to sit around and have dinner with BJ for an evening and smoke an old cheap Star cigar, you know? Even though I don't smoke, I'd have one. I'd light one up with him.
Well, Guy, it was such an honor to have you on to our show today and to be able to get some of the wisdom that you've been able to build up over your career and to share that with our audience today. And I know that we're going to close out very soon, but what are some of the links that you could send people to if they want to know more about your lifestyle IQ system?
Yeah, it's real simple. Just put in mylifestyleiq.com. It'll take you to the webpage. And when you get there, you can sign up for Zoom introductions. There's all sorts of links that we can send out to you. You'll get a real feel for it. So it's mylifestyleiq.com. That's the easiest way. And we'll send you a bunch of stats of what's going on in the world today. I mean, let's face it, people are ordering cars during the Super Bowl halftime from their living rooms. Today, people want information and management, if you want to call it that, delivered where they are, when they want it, 24 hours a day, and medicine's doing it. 75% of the hospitals are doing it, and 50% of the patients in those hospitals are on remote patient management, meaning medicine is in your patients' living rooms, bedrooms, dining rooms, workplaces. We've got to make sure we're getting our message out to them. So mylifestyleiq.com, and we'll get you some information.
Well, Guy, it's really an honor, and we want you to have a great rest of your day down there in old San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
And we're going to have a great day out here in the sunshine state of Colorado.
You know, that's where I raised my kids, and then I had a 500-acre ranch up in the mountains there until just about a month ago. So that was going to be where I wound up at the end of my life. Had that place for 25 years. I love Colorado.
Well, we love you too, and we want to make sure that you have a great rest of your day, and we will get you scheduled for a second interview with us.
I would love that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being our guest, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.